It's not for being my well-being, but for any being on the planet to be in need just shouldn't be. The laws of equilibrium dictate that the political economy will not equilibrate till the wages in Africa are at par with the wages here. Hi, I'm Paul Duchesne, and welcome to Mama Paul's video podcast. Today is Saturday, February the 20th, 2021. And February 20th would be the last day of the Mercury retrograde. So if things have seemed like they're not coming to a conclusion, and things are hanging in the air, and things are uncertain, astrologically, there's three Mercury retrogrades during the year, and the first one from the middle of January till about now. So the retrograde is officially over, but it might linger for a few more weeks. So probably by around March 12th, it'll be completely over, and anything you've been planning that seems to be hanging in the air, well, get ready to go for it. I had my COVID shot just yesterday, which was the last day of the Mercury retrograde, and my daughter sort of pushed me into getting it, and I was resisting, but I went for it anyway. And it went okay. It went okay. We didn't have to go too far, and we didn't have to wait too long, and the whole thing took maybe an hour from the time we got on the line to getting inside to getting the questionnaire and then having the shot, and then waiting 15, 20 minutes, a half hour for to see if there were any complications, and there weren't any. Pretty much, other than a minor ache in my arm at the end of the night, which I noticed. Other than that, I didn't really have any downside. My wife felt a little bit lethargic and maybe like she had run 10 miles that day, which she hadn't. But other than that, she's okay today. We're both fine, and we're tanned, well rested, and ready to go on with things as they are. So I opened up with a poem today. I'm going to go back to an old format I used to do, which was poetry, politics, and tea. And I just wanted to do that just to sort of get back into this old groove for a minute to see how that goes. Now, hold on one second. Yeah, hello? Yeah, who's calling? No. Hey, I had a feeling you might get into the mix pretty soon. Yeah. Yeah, well, that was quite a stunt. Oh, I see. It wasn't a stunt. Well, what was going on? You said one thing on the phone, and your wife said something else, and she contradicted you. Everybody contradicts you. And then you were on Fox News, and Hannity was giving one excuse, and you came along and you gave another excuse. Can't you get your excuses right? Hold on a second, would you? Just hang on a second. I'll get back to you, I promise. Yeah, who's calling? Who's this? Greg? You work in a monastery? Oh no, Greg Abbott. Oh, Greg Abbott of all people. You know, it's funny. I've got your senator on the line over here. And, well, we were just talking about his trip a little bit. He's so much in the news. How could you pass it up today? But I wanted to ask you, what about the windmills? Do you think that the windmills were really the big problem? It wasn't really the windmills? Well, that's what you said originally, right? It was the Green New Energy deal was the AOC was causing the problems, and maybe it was Hillary. Maybe Hillary did it, you know? I mean, everything seems to be going on with... she's usually behind almost anything that happens in the country, Hillary. So you're going to get all over the energy group, huh? Aren't you the one that made sure they were deregulated? And you guys, you don't want to get involved with the federal system, right? Well, it might keep you afloat because you don't seem to be able to handle it. Hold on a second, would you? Let me go back to Ted for a minute. Hey, Ted. Yeah. Listen, I got Greg on the phone right now, and I don't know. He seems to be bouncing back and forth between wanting aid, not wanting aid, and what do you think? You don't think, huh? Well, are you in the? How are you doing with the energy company? Are you getting enough donations from them? That's classified information. So the whole grid thing is sort of classified, and okay. Listen, I like the mask. The mask is really good. It's good you showed up with a little Texas right on your face so nobody would miss you. But listen, maybe get your father in on this. I think a while ago you guys were involved with the Kennedy conspiracy. God knows what we can get you for this time. Okay, listen, Ted. Do me a favor, Ted. Just disappear. You're better off not even being around. Okay. All right. Hey, Greg. Yeah, I just I hung up with him, and to tell you the truth, you are a piece of work. You really are. I mean, this whole business of deregulation and live free, or I guess live free or die. Maybe you guys could use New Hampshire's motto: live free or die. Well, if you're not free, you're going to die, right? So maybe live free and die. That could be the motto: live free and die. You'll be subject to, well, how many deregulation caused the problem in Galveston? I know that. Well, every time I turn around, you guys are deregulating something. It's really interesting. There was a fellow from California moved to Texas, and he was a little perturbed that he didn't get a phone call telling him that there was a natural disaster that was going to. You guys don't do that either. Well, I understand personal responsibility. He should have seen it coming. All right, well, you guys have got a whole lot to deal with, so I'll just get off right now and get back to what we were doing, and hopefully I won't hear from you again either. Okay, all right, bye now, Greg. Boy, what a storm in, you could say shitstorm. I'm not sure if I can say that on YouTube, but boy, what a storm in Texas it was, huh? Listen, what I wanted to do is sort of briefly just run through a couple of articles that were in the newspaper this last week that really grabbed me. And I'm going to just open up with a little quickie here. And there's our man, Rush Limbaugh. What a piece of work this guy is. This guy is unbelievably, they want to have flags at half-mast for him. The guy got a Congressional Medal of Honor a few years ago. Now, on my weekly show, I've been doing the Powell Memo. And in my Powell Memo series, I'm talking about how these think tanks were created in order to affect the news. Well, Rush Limbaugh is the perfect example of this. He is literally the godchild or the grandchild or the child of this whole federalist pro-corporate movement. He is the reason for, well, he's not the reason for it. It goes back further than that. But he's the mouthpiece that allowed these kind of things to not only happen, but become popularized and acceptable and part of the, I remember I used to listen to Rush a lot when he first came on the air, and he was pretty interesting. He used to, well, he would always, what would he do? He would take let me get this. He'd crush up paper and use it as a sound in the back, and he'd have things like this, and he'd have little things on his desk, which he was very clever with. And originally he was a sportscaster, and then he wound up doing these talk shows. And when he first started, he wasn't too bad. He was sort of actually fairly interesting, and he was staying current, and he didn't seem to have as big a hammer. But the more popular he got and the longer he was on, the worse his attitude got towards anything that was the least bit a liberal or in favor of people and anti-corporate. Then he created the feminazi word, which really irked me. And I'm on the road driving one day, and Rush starts talking about how he gives a whole little feminazi rap, and then he starts talking about how there's not one woman he can think of in the 20th century that's worthwhile even lauding. And I was smoke out of my ears. I pulled off to the side of the road and I started writing names down. And within like 2 or 3 minutes, I've got Jane Jacobs, who went up against Robert Moses and was responsible for Soho becoming Soho and stopping the lower Manhattan freeway from cutting across Soho. Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, Bella Abzug, Shirley Chisholm, political, Marilyn Waring, who did the famous Sexualizing Global Economics, showing that women are working their butts off all around the planet and not getting paid a dime for it. And while men are sitting around smoking and playing cards, women are toting water back from wells. I mean, the list goes on. There are dozens, hundreds, lots of women who have been proactively making changes in this country for years, and for somebody like him to denigrate them and to whitewash them and just sort of wash them out of the way, it was really embarrassing. So Rush Limbaugh used to really irk me, and then he would be the one who they'd be playing his show in the Capitol lunchroom for years. You wonder why Fox News is where it is. You wonder why 70% of the Republicans think that Joe Biden didn't win the election, because of his savvy with radio talk show and his ability to get themselves into the mainstream. They are the mainstream. All right, so let's get rid of Rush there, and let's see what else. Let's see what else we can come up with. Well, that was one. Oh, this was a good one too. This was probably, and this was the implosion reducing one of Trump's casinos in Atlantic City. So they took the casino down, and I think I was in the car once again driving when I heard them playing the story about it coming down, and they background the music of the demolition. And it wasn't that big a story, but to me it was a little bit on the symbolic side. Ever since the January 6th insurrection, the Donald has been sort of pushing his head through and trying to keep himself relevant and challenging, of all people, McConnell. I mean, he would probably throw his own mother under the bus, this guy. But he's trying to stay relevant, and he may. Noam Chomsky thinks he's going to be a force to be dealt with for the next period of years. And Noam Chomsky doesn't have too many periods of years left to go. But just recently he gave an interview on Richard Wolff's show, his Economic Weekly show, and that's pretty much what he said. But he thought he was going to be in cahoots with McConnell, and I think McConnell is making a definite break. McConnell is what they say an institutionalist, so he believes actually in the institution. He may be a lying, cheating SOB, and he may do a lot of things, but he believes in the integrity of the institution. Trump doesn't believe in the integrity of anything other than himself. He is the institution. So McConnell seems to be trying to keep the fabric of this government together, which is shaky at the very least. But for me, it was just symbolic virtue, symbolic value made it a worthwhile story. The next one, let me grab the other one, which would be the, where is it anyway? Where's the Amazon story? I don't have it. Okay, I didn't put it up on a pick. So let's we'll go back to where we are. Make sure we keep the screen clean. Alrighty. So the screen is clean. Amazon puts its workers at risk. These were all from the Thursday paper this week. Thursday the 18th, February the 18th. And Amazon, in spite of the fact that they didn't get the approval about a year or so to put the whole big thing that they wanted to put into New York, they do wind up having a couple of facilities in New York, and one is a delivery depot in Queens where they wanted to have this other massive warehouse, and the other one is a warehouse on Staten Island. Good place for a warehouse on Staten Island. So anyway, the city is challenging them for not keeping up with the COVID principles, not cleaning the warehouses, not conducting adequate tracing, and taking retaliatory action against anybody who complained about their procedures. Now, Jeff Bezos made enough money that if they paid every Amazon worker a $115,000 bonus, if Amazon gave every one of its workers a $115,000 bonus, which would be considered a middle class, a slightly upper middle class salary in California, or maybe a middle class salary in California. If he gave every one of them $115,000, he still would be the first or second richest person on the planet, and his net worth would be incrementally decreased. Now, there are cases in some warehouses where people don't get breaks and they're given a little plastic bottle to pee in, pee bottles. There are people who can't get steady shifts who come in at 1 o'clock in the morning and get off, the next afternoon. The practices that have put Amazon where they are is the reason that they're making gazillions of dollars, and the lack of regulation allows them to do it. And this is one of the big problems we have, is the lack of regulation. And it's the right-wing theory of capitalism unregulated is going to, as the water rises, it's going to lift all the boats. Well, I'll tell you, it lifts about 1 or 2 boats, and most of the little boats from the waves get knocked over. So it's not working. Okay, maybe I can find something a little bit more positive here, and I know I've got a couple here, and this one is really, well, this is interesting. Let me bring this story up. This has just got to be the most interesting. I couldn't believe this one. Overnight success. It's proof is in the glass. And this was in the food section on Wednesday's paper. I'll go back one day. But one day, the food section from the Thursday paper. And in it, they're talking about whiskey. Now, my father was a bartender in Manhattan and owned his own bar, so I sort of grew up around a lot of alcohol. And I haven't drunk or booze in about 50 years, since I was about 27. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I started drinking again a little bit, and I'm having a little bit of a sort of a martini without the vermouth at night. But this story is about whiskey, and this was really interesting. I had no idea how they got those flavors into whiskey. And what they do is the whiskey it gets the temperatures from the wood that the whiskey is storing in. So this isn't an overnight thing. This is for years. They store these whiskey. I mean, you've seen different labels: 25 years, 10 years, blah blah blah. So it's a big deal. It's a big investment. Upfront investment to get all this equipment together and to get the mash together, and there's a lot of equipment, not just the barrels that are going into this. So it takes a significant capital investment to get this thing going. But once they get it going, then they're moving along. But what happens is it's in the bottle. As the seasonal temperatures change, the whiskey that's in the barrel leaches the flavor and the color from the wood. So that's where it's coming from. It's literally coming from the leaching from the wood in the barrels over, in some cases, from years to several decades. So the Silicon Valley types, back to Silicon Valley, have been trying to figure out a way around this to speed things up and make it quicker. And there's a half a dozen different companies, and the one guy started off with, instead of having a barrel, what they did was they made a bunch of tiny little chips with the wood. So they put the tiny little chips, and then they put the whiskey in a steel cylinder, in a stainless steel cylinder. And then they raised the temperature and lowered the temperatures. Raised it, lowered it, raised it, lowered it. So they were causing the little wood chips to act as the medium for the whiskey to suck the color and the flavor out of the wood. But they were able to do it in an accelerated fashion. This is a really interesting story. If you're interested in this, you could go to the New York Times and Google "overnight success. Proof is in the glass." It's physically what the page 2 of the article looked like, and they show a bunch of scientists there and some of the equipment they're using and the chips. Very interesting. I had no idea where that came from, and I found that incredibly interesting. We're going to go to 2 more on the upside of positiveness here. And to me, this next one is without a doubt the best story of the week. And you can see the headline there. So we're in the Thursday paper, international section, and it's "The Art of Defiance Adds Meaning to Mass Uprisings." Adds meaning to mass uprising. What you see is a picture of a young woman, almost a teenager practically, in traditional dress, and she's got a wok and a spatula. Now, you may be aware of the fact that there's been a huge reaction to the coup that took place in Myanmar, and formerly known as Burma, the country where Aung San Suu Kyi was held as she was in a lockdown for over 10 years, I think. So when the original coup came, she gets arrested and put in one of these fancy upscale kind of lockdowns. Her father was a major leader, prime minister in Burma, so she came from a pretty politically savvy family. and they treated her pretty well. And she was on an island, and she had people with her and everything. But she was there for quite a while. And during that period of time, she gets nominated for a peace award. Well, a while later, the Burmese come in. There's an election, and she winds up winning. But it's not. She winds up winning and taking a secondary seat, and she sort of forms a coalition with the military. Well, during all of this time, she went from being the saint of Burma to being the goat of Burma. Everything she seemed to have stood for 20 years ago suddenly was being eradicated. She was literally at one point supporting she appeared to be anyway, supporting the massacre of the Rohingyas in the northern part of the country, various other things that she was going along with the military right and left. Well, suddenly, there's a coup recently, and suddenly she gets swept up in the coup. And right now she's arrested again. So suddenly she goes from being the saint to the goat, and now again, I don't know where she is right now. And for months I was trying to figure out what her position was, and I really couldn't make sense of it. But the country itself is in the throes of standing up to this coup. And last week they had marches and parades, and they made floats. Small towns, hundreds of miles away from Rangoon, people were making floats. It was like Mardi Gras Day, and they were making floats, and they were getting dressed up, and they were dancing in the street. Thousands of people. Well, it's still going on now, and we've got thousands of people, and they have Aung San Suu Kyi's "Save Us, Save Our Leader, Future and Hope." They're running laser. Let me throw this up there real quick. You can see that they're putting laser images on the buildings, and there's like a peace sign with a dove flying overhead. There's all sorts of activity, and the military is a little bit flustered by this whole. They don't know how to deal with this much civilian resistance going on for this long. I got to say, Myanmar is becoming a real symbol of what can be done and what should be done, and maybe what all of us should be doing. When I said earlier about women heroes, Aung San Suu Kyi was one of my women heroes. I crossed her off the list after she sort of changed her position. Maybe we'll put her back on the list. I know I can be a mass of contradictions. Most people can be a mass of contradictions. We'll see what happens. I got one more little story here. And the reason I'm going to put it up is, well, no, I'm not going to put it there. Let me go here. Let's see if we can find it here. There it is. Yeah. Okay. And this is, it says, get the chips and chill, a go-to grocery store. And we'll put the pic on the side over here. And the store is AirOne. AirOne, the grocery store in Los Angeles. Now, AirOne, which is spelled E-R-E-W-H-O-N, AirOne, and it's an anagram of the word nowhere, and it was based on a book written by a Butler, I think was the author. I have a copy here someplace, and it's almost AirOne is almost nowhere spelled backwards with an inversion of two letters, which is why it's an anagram and not a simulacron, as they would call it. Anyway, this AirOne was the base, the fountainhead of macrobiotic retail in the 60s and 70s. It was sort of founded by Michio Kushi and the Kushi Institute people back in the 60s, and they were the definitive original people certifying organic foods. Now, when you got into macrobiotics, the original diet was a rice-centered diet. Well, over the years, it's expanded, and it's grown, and it's changed, and it's yuppified, much like, well, I'm not going to compare it to Whole Foods. It's nothing like Whole Foods. To this day, any product that AirOne sells is generally a little bit more expensive and certified organic on all levels. I'll give you an example. The wife was making a recipe a few weeks ago. She was using mirum, which is a rice wine vinegar. Well, we went to the store and we bought some mirum. Well, when you looked at the ingredients on it, it was sugar with corn syrup and another sugar. There were 3 different sugar syrups, and no rice koji in it at all, which is what the product is supposed to be made from. So I went to the store and I found a bottle of AirOne Mirum, and sure enough, rice koji, organic ingredients, no sugar. So you get what you pay for. Well, part of the article is talking about how this neighborhood, which it's on the edge of gentrification, and they're worried that the AirOne folks are going to help gentrify the area, which may in fact be happening. Today, many young people eat organic stews, work out, meditate, and posting their regimens on social media in hopes of going viral. Excess is out and moderation is in, at least outwardly so. Well, that's good news. Excess is out, moderation is in. So I think what we did was we did some straight negative kind of stories. We switched and found a couple of positive kind of stories. And what I'm going to do at the very end here is I'm going to drink some tea and read a little poem. So let me just go over to, well, we better get rid of that first. We'll get rid of that. Okay. So let's go over to the New Yorker for a second while I bend down and get my tea tray out. And then we'll, let me see if we can work this. I sort of had this planned. So let's go down. Okay, there's the tea tray. There's my little tea setup. And, well, let's open it up. Okay, there we go. So I have hot water. I've got my Kuman white tea. A little Yixing teapot. Yixing teapot, you can always recognize. They always have a stamp on the bottom, and they're made from these clays, and they're just marvelous teapots. And they hold. I will use certain teapots for white teas, and different ones for black teas. They will. It's sort of like it's like the wood. It's holding some of the flavors into the pot itself. Now, I'm sure they have directions on here, but I'm not big on that. Usually what I put in is probably a good heaping tablespoon. I'm sure that's what this is. Maybe a little more today. Okay. So the tea, just so you can see it, I don't know how well you can see that. So. Anyway, these are marvelously smelling. And white tea is the least processed of all the teas. So they pick the leaf and they dry it. It's not oxidized on any level at all. So white teas are from my perspective, the cleanest teas. White teas have more of a brisk flavor to me than a lot of green teas. I don't think a lot of green teas. Green teas for me have a very vegetable-y flavor, many of them. Not all of them, but many of them. So I have in the teapot, and we're going to put a little bit of water in there, a tiny bit of water, and we're going to wake up the leaves. So we're going to shake it all around, wake the leaves up, and pour this off. So I didn't cover the leaves. I just sort of dampened them a little bit so they're woken up. They call it waking the leaves. And now we're going to put maybe half of that teapot in there. We're going to let this steep for about 2 or 3 minutes. Let me finish off the preliminary. See, most people, a lot of tea aficionados would toss that away, and they wouldn't bother with it. Okay, while it's steeping, I'm going to read a little poem. Try to do this in 2 minutes. This was my Nikki Giovanni book, which I introduced a little while ago. Let me bring my head up a little more on the screen here. Okay, and it was Make Me Rain was the name of the book, and I've been following Nikki Giovanni for years, but I just bumped into this poem in here. I'm not going to read the whole poem. The poem is called Vote. It's on page 8 of her book here. And I'm going to skip through it, but it's called Vote. It's not a hug, it's not mistletoe, it's not a colored egg. It's a vote, saying you are a citizen. I should be able to vote from prison. I should be able to vote from the battlefield. I should be able to vote when I get a driver's license, when I buy a gun. I must be able to vote if I'm in a hospital, an old folks' home, if I need a ride to the polling place. I am a citizen. I must be able to vote. Folks were lynched. Folks were shot. Communities were gerrymandered. Folks who believed in the Constitution were lied to, burned out, bought and sold because they agreed all men were created equal. It's not cookies, not cake, but it's the icing that is so sweet. Good for the folks, good for us. Vote. That's the poem. And I thought that it was really appropriate considering what's happened in Georgia, where they got out the vote and were able to turn the state of Georgia and then turn the Senate of the United States. So this has been steeping for barely 2 minutes, but I've got enough in there that it's probably just right. And let's see. Love that flavor. It's a, like I said, it's a brisker flavor with some fruity overtones to it. It's a tea from the Himalayas, Kumaon white tea. The company is a Young Mountain. Peace, patience, and persistence. We'll see you as soon as we can.